Hello everyone, so this is a short video taking you through some of the course specific changes on the Masters in Learning and Teaching in the Creative Industries, looking at some of the changes we're making as a response to COVID-19. I'm Jerry Lewis, I lead the MA in Learning and Teaching down in Brighton, so let's get into it. First off, I am assuming that you have already watched or been present for the kind of more general BIM webinar that we ran on Wednesday 29th. If you haven't watched that, I'd ask you to go and look at the recording. If you signed up, then you'll certainly have access to that. There's lots of kind of useful institution-wide information, and you'll hear from myself and all the other course leaders that are part of the postgraduate school. So if we're talking about the Masters in Learning and Teaching in particular, I think, first off, it's useful to look at how next year, the next 12 months of learning are going to be slightly different at BIM. So in kind of overall terms, you might already know that in semester 1, so this is September through to December, we're going to be mostly delivering our teaching online. So there are two modules that run in semester 1, Teaching, Learning and Assessment and Investigating Learning and Teaching. Alongside those two modules, if you are undertaking a teaching placement at BIM, those are also going to be running. And you can see that there are some elements of all three of these aspects of the course that will be on campus. We're still going to deliver some of this face to face, but predominantly we are moving the course online. Really, that is a safety precaution. The risk to public health is likely to be the highest in the coming semester. There's even a chance of a second wave hitting for COVID. So we're going to socially distance as much as possible. We're going to give you as much of your learning experience online as we think is reasonable and effective, while protecting the really important face-to-face components. So in semester 2, so this is now January onwards, January through to June, we actually intend for the course to return to normal. So what you get in semester 2 is a choice of 3 optional modules. You can see here: Education, Ideology and Society, Curriculum and Instructional Design, and Coaching and Mentoring. Now, those modules actually have been designed in what we call a blended fashion, i.e. both face-to-face and online. Anyway, that was always the plan for, frankly, most of the master's course. But as you can see, the predominant sessions that you'll have are going to be on campus. They are going to be face-to-face. So essentially, all of BIM will hopefully be reopened and we'll be back to normal. Again, for those of you that are doing the full-time version of the course, you'll see here that you'll start your research dissertation in January. Now, that has always been planned as an online module. You're not going to be online necessarily when doing your research, but the support that we offer you through supervision tutorials and some upfront seminars, that was always planned to be online. We have quite an international teaching team. We're often off around the other BIM colleges doing teacher training. So really we've been kind of doing tutorials and sessions online for quite a number of years now. Lastly, you can also see teaching placements continue in semester 2, and these should be back to their normal schedule, which means that they'll be predominantly face-to-face as the rest of BIM's undergraduate and further education curriculum return to the colleges as well. Then finally, you do have a summer semester. So the third semester, you will all take a module called Creative Educational Practice, which is the most face-to-face, the most experiential module that you'll get on the course. That is hopefully going to be back to normal. And for those of you that are doing your research dissertation, you'll be finishing that off. So that's in 2 halves over semesters 2 and 3. And again, that's all supervised online. You will notice there are no teaching placements through the summer, and that's simply because this semester runs from June through to the following September, and BIM's undergraduate and further education courses do not, so there are no placements you can do. If you do want to organise your own teaching practice, you are more than welcome to do so, and it will be very helpful for your learning. So some notes on our kind of general approach, mainly thinking about semester 1 and how we're changing things up to be a bit different. So you'll notice that there are still face-to-face classes that are going on. We are committed to keeping you all safe, to protecting the well-being of the whole BIM community and yourselves as Master's students in particular. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to review government guidance on social distancing. So the current ruling is 1 metre plus. That might expand and loosen as we go through the course. But what this means is that you'll be in smaller groups for your face-to-face classes. So rather than 15, 20 people in a class, you'll be in smaller seminar groups of, say, 5 students plus a tutor. That might increase to 10, depending on the room. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to run our face-to-face sessions in kind of longer bursts. So we'll ask you to attend a whole day event or perhaps a 2-day event rather than coming in for shorter sessions of a couple of hours. Really that's just to stop you having to travel in so much, to risk your health on public transport and things like that. So we're going to supplement those face-to-face classes with online learning. If you've been at BIM or if you've been finishing off your undergraduate degree, then you've probably experienced some form of online teaching already. What we're going to do is likely to be similar to those experiences. So we run classes that take place on Zoom. This is BIM's kind of meeting conference call software that we buy into. So we'll run classes of about 2 hours on Zoom. They'll be quite interactive. We have functions where we can put you into breakout rooms. There'll be discussions, there'll be tasks. It won't just be lectures. The other thing you'll get are guided independent tasks. So we'll set you things to do. Could be pieces of reading, could be a task where you apply a certain concept to your teaching, report back on it, and we're going to run those on BIM's virtual learning environment. So that will be on Moodle or perhaps Microsoft Teams. We have different platforms where we can communicate. So across all aspects of the course, even though it's changing up, we're still kind of retaining some important things that we emphasise. Let's empathise. Firstly, there's this idea of flexibility and accessibility. So we recognise that people are in very different situations. Some people may not be in Brighton while studying the course. Some people might not have universal access to tech. So both face-to-face and online, we are going to be quite flexible. We're certainly going to be asking you about your accessibility needs and trying to help you engage with the course as best you can. The other things that are really important to the learning experience on this MA are collaboration, getting to know each other in the group, forming a community of professional teachers. Ultimately, this is what we're here to become. And lastly, just the idea of being active in your learning, actually doing things that are useful, practicing these skills of teaching, and getting really high level support from both your tutors and your peers. So, one of the big questions that we always get is, okay, what is my week going to look like? How many hours a week am I going to be studying? Now, this isn't so related to the changes from COVID, but I think it's useful to talk about some of this stuff again. So there are 2 ways of thinking about this. It's useful to start with the idea of, what does a module take in order to be successful? And then if you're taking the full-time course, you're obviously studying 2 modules at a time. So on the left, we've got the part-time. On the right, we're going to have the full-time version of the course. Now, each module that you take, each taught module, is 30 credits. So it's useful to think about that a little bit. A credit is basically just an amount of work. So 1 credit is 10 hours of study. That's kind of how we calculate how much work a course takes. So 30 credits, a module that is 30 credits, should take 300 hours of studying time. Okay? If you divide that by the 15 weeks that go into a semester, that comes out as 20 hours of work per week. That's a really good, actually, estimate of how much time you should be spending on the course. You're obviously not going to get 20 hours of teaching, but thinking about a given working week and saying, okay, well, I need to be spending a certain amount of time in order to be successful, helps you think about the independent time that you're going to be putting in. So what support do you actually get? Well, on a typical module on the course, you'll get a series of supportive activities. Firstly, in a typical module, you will have, let's say, a 3-hour evening session weekly. So usually this would be face-to-face, but I'll show you how this gets adapted to the online and the kind of blended versions in a second. So a 3-hour session in the evening. You'd also need to spend at least 3 hours preparing for that session and doing the follow-up tasks. You will have 3+ hours on your teaching placement if you're taking one. And then across the 15 weeks, there will be between 1 and 2 weekend workshops. So kind of whole day events or 2-day events run on the Saturday and Sunday, a more intensive workshop experience. Alongside that, you're also going to get 2 hours of developmental tutorial per module. And then you can think about the rest of those 20 hours being put towards independent study, writing up your assessments, carrying out research, all of that different activity. It's quite useful to think about this, isn't it? So if you want to think about the full time, because that's assuming that you're taking one module, that you're doing the part-time version of the course. Basically, you can just times that by 2 and you get the full-time course because you're taking 2 modules at once. So that means 2 3-hour evening sessions a week, which is 6 hours. You double that up to 6 hours plus of weekly preparation and follow-up. You'll be doing 6+ hours of placement time a week, and then again between 2 and 4 weekend workshops across the whole 15-week semester, and you will again be eligible for twice the amount of developmental tutorials. So hopefully that gives you something more of a kind of ballpark figure. Again, if you're on the full-time version of the course, that does really work out at 40 hours of work, including your independent time. So it's going to take quite a lot to be successful in the course, and I kind of want you to be aware of that up front. So let's think a bit about how the course gets translated online. So we're obviously changing a bit for the first semester. This is teaching, learning and assessment. This is your first module if you're doing the teaching placements. So on the early career pathway, the placement pathway, this is your first core module, and basically this is your introduction to how to teach, how to support learning, design sessions, how to assess and give feedback. So instead of the 3-hour weekly sessions that we do at BIM, we're going to be running similarly weekly classes on Zoom of only 2 hours long. So these are going to be on Thursdays from 6 until 8 p.m. We run an hour less just because people get very fatigued in doing online sessions. Then you'll basically just have a bit more time for online activities, and you can be very flexible in when throughout the week you do this. So you can think about it as 2 hours of Zoom class and then probably more like 4 hours plus of preparation and follow-up. Then you are going to get some face-to-face class. We're going to run these in day workshops, and you're going to get 3 face-to-face workshops. Some of these will be for content, but the main reason that we're doing this is for something called micro-teaching. Micro-teaching is where you plan a lesson, you deliver it to everyone else on the course, and then you get some really great feedback about how you can improve your teaching. It's a kind of lab environment for trying things out as a teacher. The other thing you're going to get, we're going to give you some online workshops as well. So this will be, again, a 6-hour day. You won't be spending all of it tied to a Zoom call, but this is going to be more of an assignment workshop where we give you certain tasks to develop your writing, give you time to go off and try that, and then get some feedback on the work that you've produced. And then finally, as we've said before, we run tutorials, but these will be online. We're very used to doing online tutorials. They're very effective for a lot of people, and this allows us to be completely flexible in terms of when in the week you like to do this. I often do tutorials on weekday evenings or kind of across the day. You might also be studying a module called Investigating Learning and Teaching. So this is a core module on all parts of the course. Basically, you'll be doing this one if you're studying full-time or if you're studying part-time but without a teaching placement, so the experienced educator pathway. Basically, this is your introduction to educational research. So looking at how we can get to know things, answer the big questions that we might have about education. This is similarly delivered to the last module. So again, we're going to run 2-hour-long evening classes on Tuesdays from 6 till 8 p.m. every week. Again, they're going to be supplemented with online activities that we're going to run. These will be flexible. Again, you can think about putting about 4 hours a week into these. We will have face-to-face workshops, but we're only going to have 2 of these. Frankly, these aren't as essential to the development of your research practice as they are to your teaching practice. And these workshops are mainly going to focus on really kind of experiential research skills, perhaps doing interviews or focus groups that are really useful to do in the room. And again, an online workshop. Some of this will be working on your assessments, working on your research. Some of it will be practicing research skills. And of course, the online tutorials. Great. So what about teaching placements? Well, I've told you that teaching placements is going to be different for the first semester. Well, this is really going to be quite dependent on what kinds of placement you're actually doing. So placements need to be flexible according to what module they're actually placed on. This could be different depending on whether it's a live performance module or a music production module or something like a kind of cultural music history module. Again, the basic setup here is that in semester 1 most of BIM is going to be online, and then in semester 2 hopefully things will be back to normal and things will be in their usual face-to-face mode. So you can think about your placements as kind of having 2 halves to them. You will be on the same module throughout the whole year, but you'll actually have quite an interesting experience in seeing that delivered online first and then seeing how that gets turned and translated into a face-to-face experience. Could actually be really useful for your learning. However, there is an interesting opportunity in semester 1. The BIM undergraduate curriculum is looking to run its live performance workshops, so group ensemble performance in the first semester as face-to-face. They're kind of reorganising all of the buildings to try and make that work, and they are looking for teaching assistants, so that could be a really interesting thing to get involved in. Now, I'm going to be organising the timetables of your placement ready for induction. I'm doing this based on what we discussed at your interview. So I did ask you what kinds of placements you'd be interested in, what skills you have, and then I'll be approaching specific module tutors to try and get a sense of where you'd be best placed. So you'll have a draft timetable at induction, and we can talk about whether that is fully suitable or not, and we might change some things. The other thing to say is that you do get weekly tutorials, or twice a month tutorials maybe, with the person that's mentoring you in the placement, so the module leader or the module tutor. And again, those you can organise quite flexibly. In the past, people have often done online tutorials or phone calls, or sometimes have just exchanged email feedback. Now, assessment. I think it's worth just pointing out the fact that there are no assessments being changed on the course for next year at all. We don't need to change the kind of outcomes of learning that you have or the ways in which you're going to be assessed to meet an online or a blended mode. Most of your assessments on the course are in the form of written or reflective pieces, but there is a lot of opportunity to develop multimedia submissions, so using video, using visual to convey your learning, as well as just your academic writing. And frankly, none of those are affected at all by social distancing. The only things that might be are when you have practical assessments that do involve teaching. For example, in the Teaching, Learning and Assessment module, you get a micro-teaching assessment, basically. So of the 2 micro-teaching sessions we offer you, you have to engage in one of those as a form of assessment. Now, if you absolutely couldn't engage with any of those face-to-face, there might be opportunities for some kind of online access, perhaps videoing teaching that you've done. In the kind of real extremes, we can find some flexibility. So let's talk about resources. Well, it's really interesting. The resources that are tied to the colleges, tied to the buildings, don't really get used an awful lot on our course. You know, when you're learning to teach, you don't really need lots of fancy gear, unless that is, you know, tied to your subject. So for your studies on the Masters, basically there is a lot of software that is available for you. So as a BIM student, you get access to the Microsoft Office 365, so that's Word, PowerPoint, all of that stuff for free. We also give you access to a really high-powered piece of research software called InVivo. You'll get full access to BIM's virtual learning environment, Moodle, including being added to the specific course pages on Moodle for your placement, so you can actually engage as a kind of online teaching assistant there. You also get a load of academic resources online in the form of BIM's e-library and access to Sage, who are a really big publisher and kind of collector of different journals and journal articles. So again, you can see that there isn't much course-specific stuff that is dependent on the colleges being open, so we don't think that your learning experience in terms of your independent study will be too affected in the first semester at all. There are some additional resources that you can still pursue. BIM does have links with rehearsal studios, and these should all be available throughout the year. You can find that information quite easily. BIM has a fantastic student support department in terms of, you know, talking to people about things that are difficult. And we also have a great careers and industry department to help you think about how to progress your career. And there's the BIM Connect platform for alumni, when you can network and talk to other people doing similar things. There are, again, lots of extracurricular opportunities that will go throughout the year. They might be slightly affected by the move online, but really they'll just be happening online rather than happening face to face. So there are the BSAs, or BIM student associations. There are plenty in Brighton, and I think people are wanting to set up a postgraduate student association as well, which would be really nice to have representative from each college. There'll be social and networking events, mostly set up by students, honestly. In the move to a kind of lockdown study environment, lots of students have been setting up kind of informal study sessions or kind of coffee catch-ups, so you can kind of log in from your laptop at home but actually see people. It tends to be a nice and kind of humanising thing to do with your day. And BIM Brighton is also very lucky to have Poole Valley Recordings. Basically, BIM is helping BIM students and alumni run this recording label, and you could get in touch and be a part of that. BIM does run quite a few events and masterclasses, and those have been happening online now through a series of months. I'm quite a big fan of Black Mirror, and the Screen and Film School that BIM is a part of has done a fantastic masterclass with Charlie Brooker, and that was online and that's been available for ages. It's really interesting, so there are kind of lots of topical things like that coming out. There are also other events and things going on. There's something called BIM Extra, which is essentially extracurricular courses, not non-assessed courses, say in learning how to make music videos, learning how to market yourself online, participating in art and wellbeing activities, things like that. So you could go and attend any BIM Extra that you want, or you could actually run your own BIM Extra. So specific to this Masters in Learning and Teaching, we've had quite a few students actually take an area or a skill set that they have that's, you know, not contained in any of the course curricula, and then offer those and teach their own courses. People have really enjoyed doing that. And then there are plenty of collaborative projects that are being set up, some of which within the postgraduate school, and quite a few interesting collaborations between the different institutions that BIM Institute has. So I'm talking a lot about BIM and BIM Brighton as the music college, but in Brighton you also have the Institute for Contemporary Theatre and the Screen and Film School, as I said. So there are lots of different creative industries and arts disciplines that BIM Institute has. So lots of great opportunities for setting up some cool collaborative projects there. So that's kind of the end of my information about how the course is being updated for next year. You might have some questions, in which case please feel free to drop me an email at jerrylewis@bim.ac.uk. But what I thought I'd do is, since we ran this live on the Wednesday session as well, there were some really useful questions that people asked. And we had a really great discussion, quite a long discussion about some of these things. So I thought what would be helpful is to just go through these questions and give you some of the responses. So firstly, people asked some great what-if questions. The first one that came up is, what if there is another lockdown? Well, if there is another lockdown, then BIM will need to pivot to online teaching again. So we've been doing that for this year, and effectively half of this academic year just gone has been in an online format. So we've got a lot of experience doing this. Essentially, you would do all of your learning online as part of Zoom calls, rather than coming in face to face. What if there is a reported coronavirus case in BIM? Another good question. Similarly, we would have to lock down the buildings specifically, and we would go online for a shorter period of time. So in the first question, we would be responding to government guidance, and we would be essentially at the behest of the UK government in terms of the length that we would stay online. In the second case, BIM would need to essentially follow the isolation procedures. So we'd stay locked down for a certain amount of time. In a shorter amount of time, then we would be able to reopen, and we would have to continue to review the situation as it progresses. Could the course ever get cancelled? Now, I think this is a really good question, and this was coming from a place of thinking, okay, if there's another lockdown, if things get really affected, is there a chance that the course would get pulled and I would have to defer for a year? This is an incredibly unlikely event. Essentially, higher education institutions have every incentive to keep courses going and to keep students supported. Institutions would basically be ruined if they have to pull entire courses at this point. And again, this Masters is not hugely dependent on running face-to-face sessions, so we can do an awful lot to keep you guys engaged, to give you useful learning experiences online. It would be much more likely that if something very serious happened, we would move the entire course online, but then probably give you an option of deferring your studies for a year. So either to continue in a fully online course or to come back the next year when we hope things would be more face-to-face again. That's a choice we gave to students this year when lockdown first happened. There were a couple of students that did pick that, who will be coming back next year, but the majority of students wanted to progress their course and actually ended up finding quite a few useful things from learning in an online environment. Turns out that teaching online is quite a marketable skill and will probably grow more so. Okay, so some students were asking, what are the options if you live outside of Brighton? It's obviously quite a commute to come in. We have some students either living in London, which is relatively close, or in Bristol, where they were planning to run a similar MA, but now aren't. So basically we have quite a few options. You will need to come into Brighton for some sessions, but we can be relatively flexible. So we've had students from Brighton and Bristol studying this course for a number of years now. So basically what you should do is get in contact with me. We can have a chat about exactly how many sessions you need to come in for, when they would be, and I can just advise you there. On the nature of that kind of travelling into Brighton, someone was asking what is the kind of travel arrangements or travel availability to Brighton like, and is there good parking? If you live in Brighton, you probably know that complaining about parking is something of a meme in Brighton. People hate the kind of parking system and attendance. You can get free parking in Brighton, but it tends to be quite far out. The other issue is that BIM Brighton is spread across multiple campuses. So there's one in the east, one in the west, and one in the centre. So there's Brighton is quite easy to walk across, but certainly if you're travelling in from outside the city, you'll need to find somewhere to park and then probably walk a short to medium distance into the campus. Public transport is certainly an option. There are really great links between London and Brighton. However, that will be certainly impacted by coronavirus, so you'll want to think about keeping safe on the trains. Getting between Bristol and Brighton is slightly more difficult on public transport because you either need to go through London or you need to take a very long train along the coast. Connected to all this, someone's asked, okay, well, could I actually take the course fully online? Not at this stage, unfortunately. So although we are retaining this kind of option in our back pockets of moving the course online, we haven't planned for that to be the case next year, and the majority of students are going to be in Brighton. We're going to be doing things face to face, so we can have some flexibility in supporting you if you can't get into those sessions, but we cannot give individual students an entirely bespoke experience of an online course. Unfortunately, we just simply don't have the resources to do that. Might be the case in the next couple of years that we design an online and a face-to-face stream to the course, but we just can't resource that at this point. So sorry, but not quite. So that was it for the questions. We had some really good discussions around some of this stuff, and I hope it's been helpful. If you do have any further questions, anything I haven't covered, do just pop me an email. I will be more than happy to either respond by email or we can get a quick chat in to discuss. So thanks for your time, and I hope you have a really great summer. Take care.